Hello and welcome to episode 6 of MMO Weekly, presented as always by MetsmerizedOnline.com. I'm your host, Sal Manzo, and this week we're joined by friend of the podcast and now friend of the YouTube show, MMO Associate Editor Patrick Glynn. Patrick, thanks so much for being with us this week.
Thank you for having me. I'm not Mike. I'm Mike without a beard.
That's all right. That's all right. Mike's off doing some important stuff. He couldn't make it this week. Sends his regards though. We'll see him back the next time. But obviously the Mets had another series win in Colorado. Really good stuff besides the second game of the doubleheader. We'll get to all that, but I think we kind of need to start the show. With the obvious, we haven't spoken since Max Scherzer's injury announcement. Obviously the strained oblique. He's out 6 to 8 weeks. Pretty big blow to a Mets starting staff already that was starting to get thin. Obviously without the Grom so far this season, and the news with McGill, who went on the 2-week IL. I just kind of want to get your initial reactions to, the Scherzer news and what you think the Mets can kind of do to combat that and, keep the ship afloat.
Well, it sucks, first of all. I think during the Thursday game, once they announced, Robbie, one of our graphic editors, kind of whipped up a graphic. The Mets now have $90 million of money on the injured list just in pitchers. 80 million of that is Scherzer and DeGrom. So it's like clearly you're not getting the value that you're hoping for. But then also this is kind of the risky play when you have someone like Scherzer who's 37 years old. He said he's never had an oblique injury before, but at this point, kind of what's done is done. He was pitching great, but I think my big question is he out 6 to 8 weeks and then he starts throwing again, or does he start throwing again in a couple of weeks and he builds himself back up and all that? So I kind of have just in my mind ballpark the All-Star break is when he might come back, because that's basically 2 months to the day from when his injury happened, because the All-Star break's happening a little later in July this year than it normally does. But yeah, so it stinks. It's not good. And the Mets now have 3 of their first, probably their top 6 starters on the injured list now. I would think McGill's going to come back in a couple weeks. His mom especially didn't, kind of said it wasn't that big of a deal, his bicep tendonitis. I'm sure just some rest would help heal that. And then obviously DeGrom and Scherzer coming a couple months from now. But in the meantime, they really can't afford another injury. And if they do, then they might have to go into the trade market.
Yeah, no. And just to Scherzer, it was interesting. Obviously, I mean, not interesting. At first, it was scary. Obviously, you see him coming out in the middle of an at-bat like that, just, taking out, I'm done. I thought there was something with his elbow at first. That was just maybe my brain, worst case scenario.
Like if something popped or something like that.
Yeah, I was just the way it happened. He took himself out so abruptly. And, obviously it could have been anything. So, we didn't know. But after the fact, hearing him in the locker room, the post game, I did find it interesting, how well he knows his body, in the sense that he felt that I don't think he called it a rip or whatever. I forget what he referred it to, but he's like, I've never felt that before. The zing. Yes, zing, yeah. Exactly. And he knew, I've never felt that before. Something's wrong. At that point, I shut it down. I don't throw another pitch. And I find that interesting, because how many guys probably, feel something like that and think, all right, I'm going to keep going through it. And then, something worse happens because of that. I know it wasn't immediately. I kind of think back to like Noah Syndergaard in 2017 with the lat. He kind of pushed through it. There was that initial injury that he had the MRI and stuff. They didn't see anything, but then he went, obviously, I think it was in Washington.
Well, he didn't want an MRI.
Right. That's what it was. Yeah. And then obviously, it turned into that cost him the rest of the year. But, it sucks that obviously a guy you just paid a ton of money to, because it's a win now team, to anchor the staff, and especially with DeGrom out. And would I say Scherzer was his absolute best in all of his starts this year? No. Had a 5-1 record though, was around a 3 ERA. Great pitcher, just the energy, and
still a top 10 pitcher in the National League,
and just the watching him pace around the dugout, just seeing him, be in a Mets uniform, every 5th day on the mound, it was, really awesome to see and surreal. So, it's a gut punch not to have him for that long. But, like you said, McGill probably will be back as far as when that's, IL stint is up. He'll be, hopefully back and ready to go after that. You mentioned Scherzer probably coming back around the All-Star break. Hopefully that's an interesting point you made as well. Is it 6 to 8 weeks? Then you can begin your, baseball activity, or is it 6 to 8 weeks? You're back pitching again. I think that's a very interesting point. But it could be pretty wild. You could have like Scherzer and DeGrom coming back at the same time.
It'll be what would they have? They had a Zach Wheeler and Harvey pitch on the same day, way back in like 2013, 2014, something like that.
That was, I believe, Zach Wheeler's. It was a split doubleheader, and Zach Wheeler made his debut that day
That's what it
against the
was.
Braves. Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, I know we joke around a lot as Met fans are, you know, you hear it a lot. Oh, you know, it's like a trade deadline acquisition if Jacob DeGrom comes back. And then what if you have both of those guys come back at the same time? Then everyone's going to be, you know, really crazy. And you don't need to trade for anything. Look at what you got. You know,
Yeah,
I
that's a
wonder.
Jeff Wilpon trademark right there.
Yes, exactly. Thankfully, you know, none of those side. I
Back
know
to
Bartolo Colon side shows. I guess we'll get to that in a second, but I want to nix that in the ground. I don't want Bartolo Colon pitching on my baseball team. It's not a sideshow. It's a team that's trying to win. So let's
He's
get
coming
that
for
out of the
Old
way.
Timers Day. You
Right.
can't go from Old Timers Day to the, you know, to the majors. Just
No, you know, maybe in the dugout it's like a manager or a coach not playing.
yeah.
So you know, I like to get that out of the way there. But you know, I know you mentioned kind of depending on what happens, they may have to dip into the trade market. I wanted to ask you, you know, who you think could be guys maybe that might be an interesting candidate for that. I know Mahal and Cincy's been tossed around, Luis Castillo maybe as well with the Reds. But you know, can the Mets at this point also, you know, especially this time of the year, you know, asking prices are much higher than like supposedly, you know, supposed the deadline. Do the Mets have assets that they would want, you know, be willing now in like in a panic move, so to speak, to try and anchor some starting pitching here?
Well, a couple things. I think some of the guys you mentioned, especially Luis Castillo, Frankie Montas from Oakland, is
Mm-hmm.
somebody, you know, Tyler Mahle from Cincinnati as well. Like these are all guys that you'd have to pay top dollar for right now. You'd have to pay top dollar for them in May in any sort of year. You'd have to pay top dollar for them because those are guys that have more than like a year left or really half a season left on their team control. And you'd have to pay top dollar because 3 of your top 6 starters are down and other teams know that. So if they didn't overreact when Jacob DeGrom got injured 2 months ago, I don't think they would overreact and do that same sort of thing now. At this point, they really need to focus on restoring their depth, because that's really that's why you build starting pitching depth is for when these injuries happen, because inevitably they're going to happen. So now you need to have 1 or 2 more bodies just in case 1 or 2 of these other, you know, starters who are going now go down until everybody else can come back. I mean, you rebuild your depth too by people getting healthy. Like if Tyler McGill comes back in a couple weeks, you know, Trevor Williams can go back to his relief role, or maybe David Peterson goes back to AAA or something like that, and that gets better. So I don't think they need to overreact and kind of go searching in the trade market. They'll probably go surfing in the kind of designated for assignment pools and try to get like these 40-man roster guys to do it. You know, like do they want to stretch out Adonis Medina? Like, do they want to keep stretching out Trevor Williams? These are all questions that I think they'll run through before they dip into the trade market.
Interesting. And, you know, I wanted to kind of go from there to also, you know, obviously talking about the Colorado series itself. But before I do that, you know, talking about trade market stuff, I was just thinking, do you think the Mets are more likely maybe to trade for a catcher than they are for a starting pitcher? Do you think they're
Well,
real? You think that they're, you know, willing to roll? Nothing against Mazika and Nito, nothing at all. I just, you know, I'm wondering now, kind of with, you know, McCann's going to be out, also probably, you know, maybe till around the All-Star break or whatever. If they may try and upgrade that position a little bit.
well, that's what I thought too. But I mean, Mazika's come on and he's hit the ball pretty hard.
Yeah.
So you look at the catcher position specifically, and you're like, where are you downgrading? You know, like it is like obviously like McCann to Mazika, and just in terms of, I don't know, professionalism,
Right.
calling games with an MLB staff. We saw that in Mazika's first game last week. You know, you get a little bit of a drop off there, but like offensively, were James McCann and Tomas Nido really providing, you know, a lot of value offensively?
Right.
And they weren't. McCann was
Right.
performing a little bit better than he was last season, but like Tomas Nido has not been good offensively. They've been perfectly fine as defensive guys. And when you have a decently strong 1-6, 1-7 that the Mets have, you know, you can have somebody that's like what the American League has been for ever since they've had the designated hitters. That kind of end of the lineup might be your catcher who can't really hit all that much. So again, I think there you might just need to build up depth. They might have that depth in the system with Hayden Singer, you know, or Nick Nick Mayer. I'm not too sure. I don't want to offend our Mike Mayer, executive editor, but still there, like at this point, you're kind of looking for depth.
Right.
Again, maybe in past regimes and past things like that, you're going out and making a trade. You're going out and trading, you know, your internally 40th ranked prospect for Robinson Chirinos. or something like they used to do with Keon Broxton. And like, clearly I'm mentioning one certain regime here, but it's just really like, you don't need to trade assets when there are available assets, either just kind of hanging out, not playing yet in 2021. Who hasn't signed to a team. Our friend Caleb Joseph, we talked to him on the podcast.
Yep.
He's a Buck guy. Like, he's been in the organization before.
Right.
Like, it might be worth it just to give him like, hey, you want to come to AAA and kind of get your body warm for a couple weeks. But again, like 6 weeks or so, you can kind of bite the bullet there.
Yeah, no, I'm agreed there. That's interesting to what you said too. As far as if they didn't run, to change that production as it was, you can kind of, roll with it and kind of, put up with it till then.
Mazika's been performing better offensively than McCann, and like, is the drop off from like McCann's defense to Mazika's defense like that much bigger than, I don't know, the increase of McCann's offense to Mazika's offense,
Right.
So again, that's just like, and you're doing it all at a position that's not like, it's your star shortstop.
Right.
It's not like it's your top center fielder or like one of your top outfielder or something like that.
True. And it's a position overall in the sport that's just so down as a whole. So, and I think Mazika, obviously it's, another example of a guy who goes from, a lineman number down to a single digit number and they become pretty good. So I think, we got to put some stock in there. He went from like 68 to 4 this year. Now he's sitting with some pop. So there you go. You get a single digit number, you start hitting a little better. We love that. But
more like a major leaguer.
Exactly. But we'll move on to the Colorado series for real now. I think the takeaways for me, obviously, pitching wise was Carlos Carrasco in game 1 and then Taijuan Walker in game 3. Starting with the first game, Carrasco gave 5 1/3 innings. I thought he pitched really well. Overall, he's just been great this year. It just seems his command, his confidence. He plays a lot of that trapeze artist high wire, dangerous living from time to time, it seems. But he always kind of manages it. He's pitched pretty deep in the game so far this year, fifth,
He's done a really good job with his pitch count.
Absolutely.
He's done an awesome job with it.
His changeup looks tremendous. Obviously, that's a pitch he's really either worked on this year or, he wasn't healthy last year and maybe couldn't throw it as much as he wanted, and he's back to it. I give him all the credit in the world. And then on like the hitting side, has anybody benefited more from Cano getting DFA'd than Luis Guillorme?
I have that written down right here, man, because like
great minds.
I mean, I think generally as Mets fans, we talked about, all right, Cano's off the team, more at bats for Dom Smith, more at bats for JD Davis, but that hasn't been the case. Dom Smith has played basically exactly the same amount as he did, like percentage wise. He was playing about, I wrote something, last week. He was around like 45% starts before Robinson Cano, and he's about the same thing after that. Guillorme, on the other hand, I'm going to do a little looking at my notes here. He started 8 of 22 games in April, and then he's 11 of 21 in May so far. He's 11 for his last 24 in his last 7 starts. He has hits in 6 of his last 7 starts. And I mean, Ronnie's been on it on the broadcast.
Yep.
Is he's just peppering it through the right side. They just start shifting him.
Yep.
And honestly, like I don't want to say I don't blame teams for doing it, because you don't view Luis Guillorme as like a big offensive threat.
Right.
But he clearly has the ability to kind of hit it to all sides of the field, but he's pulling the ball a lot and he's just hitting it hard through the infield. That's kind of what he got away from a lot last year. I know he was injured at the end of last year and even in April too, but he's hitting it harder. He's starting to, he's getting an occasional extra base hit too, which is like, again, really all you can ask for him.
Yeah, no, it's funny. We had Eric Decker on the YouTube show last week, and he's a guy who played with Luis Guillorme, raved about his defense, great guy. Said that he could win a batting title if he maybe got into a little better shape. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but I think, and you talked about Ronnie and Keith, they, talk about the importance of great bench players, guys that can come off the bench, give you starts when you need, and can handle the bat. And Guillorme does that really well. Obviously, we know defensively what he brings to the table. He's great with his glove, but he really has made it a point. Like you said, he's pulling the ball, hitting the ball in the air more with line drives. He can handle the bat. He's a professional up there. And, obviously you wouldn't be the most excited in the world to lose, you big, you big guns in the lineup and, have to see maybe Luis play every day. But he's a guy that when he's got to make, 2-3 starts a week, maybe he's going to give you production and you're not worried about that. You're happy with, that's a guy that's going to be out there and kind of fill that gap, so to speak.
Yeah. And honestly, their best defensive lineup is with him in there.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, even if it's Jeff McNeil out in left field and Guillorme's at second base, Or, we saw on Sunday, Escobar had the day off and Guillorme was at third and he made some amazing plays there.
Right.
McNeil was over at second base, and they filled up the outfield with their normal outfield starters. Like that might be their best lineup, right now is with Guillorme in there. So they're really trying to find him at bats. I know they're trying to do the same thing with like Jankowski, and obviously Smith and Davis are much more limited defensively. But it's interesting too with Guillorme. Like Guillorme is like he said after the game, he's like he knows his role. Kind of those really great bench players. He knows he's a bench player that has to like pop in occasionally for starts. Right. Where like Dominic Smith, obviously his ceiling is higher than a Luis Guillorme. But he's in the exact same role, and he kind of came out last week, and he reiterated, he's like, I want to be starting every day, and him nor JD Davis have really made amazing arguments for themselves to be starting every day with their output. JD Davis, especially, who is hitting the ball less hard in the last couple of weeks than he was in the first month or so of the season. But yeah, it's with Guillorme, it's just interesting with their I guess their mindset of like Luis Guillorme comes to the ballpark knowing he's a bench player, and clearly it like pays some level of dividends when it comes to like knowing what your expectations are, knowing how often you're going to start. You could probably relax a little bit versus Dom, where he's like, I don't think I'm playing enough. I think I need to get into more of a rhythm,
right? And
playing every day will help me get into that. But that's what Buck Showalter's there for. That's what managing's for. That's what kind of like understanding all of these personalities and when to start them and how often they need to start and what'll, be best for the team.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I also want to bring up in game one, Starling Marte's home run after, coming back from his bereavement. That was awesome. I want to give him all the props in the world. That's really, really, really hard for anybody in regular life to have to deal with such kind of tragedy and loss like he has the last couple of years, let alone having to be a professional athlete and play games and, to handle that pressure. It's awesome. I saw, the guys jumped on him, giving him hugs and stuff. I feel like we said this a little bit last year, before kind of the raccoon stuff, and then like the second half. But this team seems very close. They seem to gel very well together. Even a guy like Dom doesn't play. He wants to play every day, but like you see these guys still cheering each other on and still, rooting for each other's success and wanting to win. And I think that goes a long way. I'm sure Buck has a lot to do with that. I know I've been critical of him with some on the field stuff, but got them playing together and loving each other. So, I know there's been past Mets managers who've tried to do that and didn't do either. So I got to give some credit there.
Yeah, I mean, it helps when Eduardo Escobar is kind of bringing you to Fogo de Chao every road trip, and he's picking up the bill every time you go out. But yeah, you're right. I mean, with Marte, especially, I mean, like from the human being standpoint, it's kind of you're happy that he's around a group of people that clearly he feels comfortable around. Because just what he's gone through is insane. His grandmother's the person who raised him.
Right.
He lost his mom at a young age.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure. And I believe the day or day or two before his grandma when his grandma passed away, a day or two after was the anniversary of his wife dying.
Oh, wow.
Well.
Yep.
So I was just like, obviously from a human standpoint, you just hope he kind of is happy.
Yeah.
I think he knows he has a job to do in the off season. He'll probably deal with those emotions a little deeper whenever he's ready to do that.
Right.
But then, yeah, I mean, from a baseball perspective, like a Starling Marte home run is a good thing, because in April, he was hitting the ball hard, but he was hitting the ball hard to the third baseman.
Yep.
Every time, they're obviously exaggerating, but that's what it felt like. But in May, he's hitting it a little bit higher in the ground, is off the ground, like his fly ball rate's up, his line drive rate is about the same. What else do I have? His ground ball rate is 16% less in May than it was in April. And yeah, in May he has a 159 weighted runs created plus. Like he's performing better, obviously. Yep. And it's not just Colorado. The Mets only scored 10 runs in Colorado this weekend.
Right.
I remember I wrote last year, I was doing the 3 up, 3 downs for Metsmerized, where we were kind of talking about the trends every series. And like basically every down, every series was, they're not scoring, but their pitching's really good. So that's kind of like supplementing it. And I did that for like 3 months until the wheels fell off.
Yep.
And then their pitching wasn't all that good either. When DeGrom left and Carrasco came back injured, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
But last year they scored 8 runs in Colorado in 3 days, which is the least they'd ever scored in Colorado last year. They went 2-1 because Marcus Stroman pitched wonderfully.
Yep.
I remember I think They might have had a doubleheader. No, I
It
think he
was
went
it,
8
it was
innings
it
or
was a, it was
something.
a 7 inning doubleheader. Stroman started one of the games, and one of the games was a strike him out, throw him out, strikeout, and then steal at second. They ended one of the games. They swept. That was the
Mhm.
Mets have had weird luck in doubleheaders. I know, obviously they didn't win both on Saturday. They split, but from last year and to this year, I don't know. I would think that they wish they played two every single day because they'd have like 120 wins or something.
Yeah,
They're
well,
pretty
I mean,
incredible.
shoot, they're still on that. I mean, they're 28 and 15 right now. They're on like 110 win pace, like pretty good. But yeah, I mean, overall, like despite the offense not being like amazing out in Colorado, which is like, I mean, I think after game one was 5-1, I'm like, oh, game two is probably going to be 10-7. I mean, 14
Somebody
runs.
scored that much close.
So
Somebody
somebody
did.
still did. It just kind of shows you with Colorado too. It's just after the Mets only allowed one run in game one, they said it was the first time I think in 84 games that Colorado didn't score at least 2 runs at home.
Wow.
And then they come out the next game, they score 11 runs, and then the very next game the Mets shut them out, and that's the first time they've been shut out at home in 2-3 years or something like that.
And a large
So
part of that was Taijuan Walker, obviously, yesterday,
mhm,
7 innings of shutout ball.
yeah,
I want to get your thoughts on that start. That was tremendous.
yes,
I was talking to somebody before the game, and I was just saying they got to get length out of him yesterday because they're so kind of short now. With starting pitcher, it would be great to give the relievers a rest.
yep.
And he did just that. 7
Mhm.
scoreless. He looked really good, looked comfortable. I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, he was really, really good yesterday. He started allowing some base runners and stuff, but he was able to. Again, I think the defense helped him out a lot
Hmm.
yesterday. I think in general, Taiwan Walker is a kind of pitcher who the defense will help you a lot if you can keep the ball on the ground, and
Hmm.
he's been doing that.
Yep.
He's like his splitter has been awesome, like awesome, awesome.
Yep.
That got a lot of ground balls yesterday.
Yep.
His if you took out his splitter out of his arsenal, he's not getting any strikeouts.
Wow.
He's not getting any strikeouts. His splitter is the one that gets people to swing and miss. He's throwing it a lot more than he did last year. He's getting more vertical break on it than he did last year. It's moving less side. It's kind of moving less side and down, and it's more just
Hmm.
moving. It's
Hmm.
just dropping out of the air. Which again, in Colorado, that's something that you want to do,
Right.
right? Is you want to keep the ball on the ground. And we saw yesterday the defense helped him out a lot, especially once they got into those holes.
Yeah. No.
He's a little bit like almost like Marcus Stroman last year. Marcus Stroman thrived because of the Mets defense. I
Right.
mean, he was really good. He has a very good pitching arsenal, but his expected ERA was a full point higher than what his
Right.
actual ERA was. Part of that is keeping the ball on the ground. Part of that is positioning your defense in order to get those outs. And the Mets, especially the last year or two, have been really good with that. But yeah, so yeah, what else do I have on a splitter? I wrote so many notes on his splitter here, but really he's just keeping the ball on the ground.
Yeah.
His biggest thing in 2021, in the last half of 2021, once the wheels fell off for him, probably partly due to fatigue,
Yeah.
because he was just giving up home runs nonstop.
Right.
If people were making a similar kind of contact about him or off of him in terms of like how hard they were hitting it, but he was giving up a home run 1 every 5 fly balls that
Wow.
he was giving up. It was like a 22% in the second half. 22% of his fly balls went for home runs.
Wow.
Versus the first half, that was more like 6%, which is a lot better. This year, now it's about 7% fly balls turned into home runs, and he's keeping the ball on the ground.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's again, like I think the Mets came into the season and they were like, if Carlos Carrasco and Taijuan Walker can just pitch as 4th and 5th starters, they'll be in really good shape, obviously, because of DeGrom, Bassett, and Scherzer. But now, I think when they started the season, they were pitching like 3rd starters.
Right.
Now they're really going to have to continue pitching like 3rd starters because Carrasco and Taijuan Walker are the 2nd and 3rd best pitchers in the rotation now.
Yeah, no, you just got to, like you said, Walker hit a wall last year. Same thing with Miguel. Obviously, both of them, they never had pitched that much, in the major leagues before. So hopefully they maybe got past that and now, can have strong second halves and can stay healthy, especially when Miguel comes back. But yeah, I mean, besides that, in Colorado, Jeff McNeil's still really good. Pete Alonso as well. Just the transformation McNeil's had. I mean, it's not really transformation, I guess. He's just gone back to the player that he was. I would think that last year, the failures he kind of had of, sitting on the plate, trying to be a pull hitter, trying to hit the ball in the air. I'm assuming that he quickly realized that that was not going to get him paid and keep him up in the majors, very long. So,
Yeah.
I think that struggle helped a lot. He's back to being a magician with the bat. I don't know between, Alonso, McNeil, and Nimmo. I don't know where they would be.
I mean, still though, like McNeil's still kind of pulling the ball just as much as he was.
Right.
And he's still kind of hitting it in the air as much as he was. But I think he's more intentional again.
Mm-hmm.
Because he is, I mean, like he is a wizard with the bat.
Right.
I think he's more intentional about what he's doing with the bat rather than maybe honing in on one certain style of hitting.
Right. And also,
like
they've been shifting him a lot. And you see now, as opposed to last, he takes that open field, he takes that base at the left field. And now as a result, like you're saying, now they're playing him more even right around, around the field, and he can pull, and then again can pull balls, so it's like you said, it's deliberate, but it's with a plan. It's not just one plan. I think that's just the theme of the whole team this year. Last year it seemed like they had one plan, and if that didn't work, you were screwed.
And he's hitting awesome with runners in scoring position is his big thing now this year too, which kind of might go like he's okay with the single or the double,
right.
With a runners in scoring position thing. But I mean, you'll see a lot of his flyouts to the warning track, or a lot of the ones where he's just kind of circling first base and cursing because he's like, how did that not go out? I think a lot of those are happening with no man on.
Yeah.
This is just an eye test. I haven't kind of dug deep into it, all that kind of stuff, like what his pull and launch angle numbers and all that kind of stuff look like, with men on versus no men on. But I mean, you saw in Colorado this week, like he flew out to the wall a couple times, or he hit a double off the wall. And I mean, the dugout's going to go crazy whenever he does hit a home run, because it feels like there have been like 6 or 7 balls off the bat since his last home run that looked like home runs.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, again, like in the McNeil, Smith, Davis camp of people, you were hoping at least one of them would turn around from what their 2021 season was. And just having McNeil in the lineup, especially when Eduardo Escobar hasn't been playing too hot over the last month or so.
Yes.
That really helps out the team a lot.
And speaking of Eduardo, I was going to bring that up, and man, when he's on, the first month of the year, he was walking way more than he used to, which was really good to see. And with runners on, he was great.
That helped a lot when Robinson Cano was behind you in the batting lineup every day. For real though, I mean, you could walk Escobar and you could pitch him outside of the strike zone.
Right.
If you could send him to first base if you knew Robinson Cano was coming up.
It's true. But now when he's bad, it's just, some of his at-bats just not even competitive, especially up in the strike zone. It just has such a trouble laying off. And I don't know if it's what happened between the first month and now, but he's tightened up so much with runners in scoring position, especially too. I've noticed that he's gotten behind like 1-2, 0-2 in a lot of those counts. The past month, whereas in the first month he was heading the count and being aggressive and getting those hits. So he's come to more of the player I guess you've seen in the past, kind of that more up and down kind of guy. But I'm hoping he can get a little bit of that plate discipline back that he had the first month of the year, because that seems to be what's killing him the most, especially the fastball up.
Yeah, I mean, he's been hitting the ball a little bit harder the last week or two. The Mets, I guess since the last time we spoke, there was the whole Cardinal series that happened too.
Right.
They won 3 or 4 from them. I mean, the Mets won 5-2 last week. So like you can weather these sort of things. You can weather Scherzer getting injured for 6 to 8 weeks when you're continuing to win series. They've won 12 of 14 series. That's really good. But again, this is kind of the issue. I shouldn't say it's the same issue, because last year the Mets hovered around 5, 6, 7, 8 games above 500, and right now they're 13.
Yeah,
this is kind of their apex right now where they've hit it, and I still think they need to build up a little bit more over the next week and a half or so. Before they go to. We'll talk about their June gauntlet in a minute, but it seems like every June the Mets have a crazy schedule. But so I mean, when you're winning these series, you have time to figure these things out. And last year we were kind of making the same excuses for Dom Smith, and McNeil, and we were just like, oh well, they're still in first place, so they can keep figuring it out. But like Eduardo Escobar is going to need to figure it out, because I wouldn't. He's making what, $10 million a year?
10 million, yep.
So I mean, like, that's a lot more palatable, and you don't need to give him playing time every day if Luis Guillorme is hitting how he's hitting.
True.
Or if a move is made to where eventually, hey, Eduardo Escobar, you're our primary bench guy, and you're the utility guy that kind of moves around the infield. And maybe they acquire somebody in the trade come the trade deadline if he doesn't figure it out. But again, it's good for now that they're able to kind of weather these things, because someone like McNeil is stepping up.
Absolutely. And I think kind of the biggest point to that is, as far as what you're saying is, Mike tweeted out yesterday, Mets have won 14 consecutive games after a loss. So,
Yeah.
that's huge. That's a sign of a good team. That's a sign of a team that understands, and even, the probably also their pitchers, coming in like Walker pitched great yesterday. They understand they have to be stoppers. It's
Mhm.
about, like you said, winning series, and that's all they keep doing. They've won
Yeah.
12 of 14, like you said. So it's still encouraging. And they never seem like they're out of it. Obviously, we know. They've come back 5 runs down. Was 6 runs down that night in
Mhm.
Philly a couple weeks ago. So it's a fun team to watch, and I think that they'll continue to get better as they get healthy. So that'll be good to see. And we'll move on kind of from the Rocky series that happened, and we'll preview a little bit this San Francisco series coming up here tonight. Obviously, we got David Peterson starting at Alex Cobb. Alex Cobb, he's pitched since that injury after playing, against the Mets. Okay, I know that
Yeah,
was the
yeah, he's pitched
last
a
time the
handful of
Mets saw
times.
him. He had that
He
injury.
wasn't out long. I think he just missed a start or something.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And obviously David Peterson pitching tonight. Hopefully he's done well when he's been up, Peterson. So hopefully, I know he got shelled a couple of times, I think in AAA recently. But
Yeah.
so hopefully, he can kind of brush that off and bring something different here. But whatever they
Yeah.
can, whatever positive they get out of him, it's a plus.
Yeah. Again, I mean, you're looking for 5 innings,
Right.
at this juncture, because I mean, like you can't look at it as like, oh, they're replacing Max Scherzer. You have to look at it as in just like you're calling up like your sixth or seventh best starter.
Right.
Which Peterson, I think in Peterson's case, like when he's pitched at the major league level, he's been pretty good. Obviously, the inconsistency down to AAA of how often he's pitching because he gets called up and down and up and down.
Right.
That might affect it, but like largely, he's been pretty good in AAA as well. I think Thomas Sapucki, who will likely start Wednesday, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's someone who's more kind of you might think twice about, or you might be a little bit nervous. But like with David Peterson, like the Mets held him off till Monday. Like I think they should have pitched him on Saturday in the doubleheader when Trevor Williams pitched 4 innings on short rest. I mean, even if Trevor Williams didn't give up, however many runs he did, would he give up like 6 runs or so on Saturday night? Even if he didn't give that up, I don't think he would have gone longer than 4 innings again, because they were pitching him on short rest.
Right.
But the Mets held off and wanted Peterson to pitch in San Francisco. Maybe slightly better for his kind of pitch arsenal or something like that. I'm sure there was a reasoning behind it. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Tonight could be one of those, 9 to 6 games between Cobb, who has not been pitching well for the Giants. One of their few reclamation projects that hasn't gone well the last couple of years. And then with Peterson, you don't know. I mean, the Giants tailor their lineups, to pitchers in the third inning. If Peterson's pitching a certain way, if the Mets make a change in the 4th or 5th inning, they're going to change their lineup around, for that. So I don't know. The Giants are always the Giants. Really, any good team is a good litmus test for the Mets, because I mean they played. What are they at? The Mets are 28, and so they played 43 games, and they played 11 against teams over 500. The Giants being one of them. Granted, the Mets are 8-3 in those games because they went 5-2 against the Cardinals and 2-1 against the Giants so far. But I mean, it's just it's a good litmus. So I mean, the Mets are going to get a hell of a litmus for all of June. But so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, no, I know. And you brought up the June. It's the NL West is a gauntlet in itself. So we'll good luck to them with that. But we're going to game 2 here. You got Chris Bassett against Logan Webb. That should be a good one. Logan Webb, I think his only bad start of the year was against the Mets. So that'll be interesting. To see if he gets his little revenge there. But obviously, it's always great to see when Bassett pitches. And speaking of him, obviously, him and the Mets, or his people in the Mets, came to an agreement to avoid arbitration, the 1-year deal. And I found it interesting too that they put in that $19 million option for 2023. So I guess I'll ask you real quick, how real of a chance do you think it is that Bassett will pitch for the Mets in 23? How much, that he'll exercise that option?
I don't think he'll pitch for the Mets on that option.
Okay.
I think that's a little bit of a fail-safe in there, because if maybe really the only time a mutual option gets picked up is if Bassett doesn't pitch as well as he thinks he does, but like maybe there was an injury or something like that it's basically a fail-safe for an injury is what I feel like. It's kind of the equivalent to a qualifying offer that, we might not have a qualifying offer this upcoming offseason if they agree to an international draft. they being MLB and the MLB Players
Mm-hmm.
Association. So it kind of feels like that. Maybe September something happens because Bassett has been a guy who's kind of, gotten little nicks and bumps every once in a while. Maybe it's like not a severe injury enough to where the Mets are like, oh, he's out all next year.
Right.
But Bassett's like, I want one more year. I want 19 million. And the Mets are like 19 million. Perfect. So I don't think he'll pitch on that option. I think it would be more realistic to where after the season, maybe they get something together.
Right.
But yeah, mutual options are like rarely picked up.
Gotcha.
Shoot, like the Kevin Pillar had a mutual option last year. And like, I don't know if he made more than, what the opt-out was on that or something like that. But like, I mean, if something like that doesn't get picked up where it's just like, I don't know, it's likely not going to happen on that option. The number you really look for is just what the buyout is and basically what the total money he's guaranteed, which is 8.8 million.
Right.
So yeah.
The Mets have so many people to resign after this year. So many people.
It's a lot.
My goodness. And core guys, Nimmo probably being at the top of that, and DeGrom, Edwin Diaz, half the team, whatever. You know what? We're not even gonna get into it now. It's about to be June. The Mets are good. We'll worry about that in November when they're, holding up hopefully a commissioner's trophy.
Yeah, I just hope there's not some sort of trade like there was when they knew Zach Wheeler. They weren't going to re-sign Zach Wheeler. They didn't want to give him money, so they were like, let's trade for Marcus Stroman, which like worked out a little bit, but the ideology, the process behind that was not good. So like I don't want them trading for people at this trading deadline who are locked in for 2023, knowing that they might lose a couple pitchers,
Yeah, no. And I don't think this regime is with that in mind. You know what I mean? I think that they're worried about making the best baseball decision that they can to help the Mets for this year and whenever, years beyond. So I hear you. I just think at this point, we're lucky enough to not have to worry about those kind of things because that was awful. Mets could have gotten Wheeler for like less than 100 million, probably that 19 season. If they offered him, he probably would have signed. But it's neither here nor there. That was back when they only pitched one good half a year. So it is what it is. Whatever.
Okay, Brody.
Height doesn't measure heart, right? Oh, wrong guy. Sorry. But there was someone else I wanted to talk about real quick too that they're escaping me. But they were good. So I'm going to skip that and we're going to probably end the show. We love our, kind of minors updates here. So Patrick, I was hoping you can kind of give us the latest of what's going on with the Mets down in the farm.
Yeah, this is where I'll grow a beard and become Mike Mayer because he basically fed me everything. Mondays, minor leaguers don't play on Mondays. So that's when a lot of the transactions happen. Some of the big ones are Carlos Cortez went from AAA down to AA. He just hasn't shown any sort of power this year. He has 5 extra base hits and 117 plate appearances. That's James McCann April 2021 numbers or Robinson Cano like over Winter League in the beginning of this year numbers. Like it hasn't been good. And this is after having 41 extra base hits in 346 plate appearances last year in AA. So obviously he's come up to AAA, not performed quite as well. And he plays the outfield. The Mets have a ton of outfielders who are really mostly corner outfielders playing in Syracuse. So he goes down, and who replaces him is friend of the Mets Mirais podcast, Jake Mangum.
There he is.
He's up to AAA. He's performing pretty well. His walk rate and strikeout rate, he's walking about 8% of the time, striking out about 20% of the time. He's 280 average, 762 OPS. Again, I'm just rattling off numbers here. His defense already is major league plus. Like he's a really good center fielder. Like you could plug him in today in the Travis Jankowski role in terms of a defensive replacement and speed.
Wow.
And he can be your guy, which maybe that'll happen by the time September rolls around.
Right.
We'll have to see that. I mean, Nick Plummer is playing pretty well in Syracuse as well. But I mean, they have Carlos Rincon, Travis Blankenhorn, Daniel Palka. Our friend Joneshwi Fargas is playing out in Syracuse. So they have a ton of outfielders.
Gotcha.
So when they dropped Cortez and brought Mangum up, Mangum should still get some routine at-bats. But I think Plummer or Mangum might be the candidates to replace Travis Jankowski eventually. Jankowski, obviously, for his role of being a defensive replacement, has done a good job, and he's the fastest guy on the team, which is great. But he has 2 hits out of the infield this year. He has 7 infield hits, obviously because of his speed. But last year when Marte was on the bereavement list and he was starting a little more regularly, like and then you have someone like Maziko or Nito at the end of the lineup, your lineup starts to thin out in that sort of sense. So you want somebody who might put up a little more competitive at-bats down the road. But then on top of that, the two big guys are Mike Vasil and Carson Seymour, both pitchers from the 2021 draft, which honestly is shaping up to be like a very good draft in terms of just like guys they identified and are truly developing in this new regime. Calvin Ziegler and Dominic Hamill are two of the other guys. They're still in St. Lucie. But all four of these guys from the 21 draft were down in St. Lucie. Carson Seymour, so far, he's 23 years old. He's now going to be, they're both moving to high A Brooklyn. Carson Seymour has a 1.19 ERA in 30 and 1/3 innings.
Wow.
He's on the IL. He just got placed on the IL.
Gotcha.
But they still called him up anyway. Mike said he's going to be fine. It's just kind of a minor thing. And honestly, with a lot of these young guys too, even if they went to college, like they aren't going to pitch entirely full seasons. They're not going out and pitching, 5 innings twice a week the entire season anyway. Gotcha. It's going to take them 2 or 3 years to really build up to a major league level. Max Scherzer talked about doing that before the season and how that helped him a lot. And Mike Vasil, on the other hand, he was the guy who's kind of like he got drafted in the 8th round, I think it was, came out of Virginia. Originally should have signed out of high school. That's who our man Keith Law was talking about, who basically he should have signed out of high school. I don't know why he didn't. He went to Virginia and they completely messed up his mechanics.
Yeah, right.
It's gotten corrected. 180 ERA in 35 innings. Oh. Mike said of Vasil, he's been more consistent with his velocity, and both him and Seymour are limiting hard contact, which obviously these are just kind of like, we're just talking about very baseline things, baseline trends that you look for in guys who are 22, 23 years old before you move them up to the next level. And honestly, that St. Lucie team, that's the only team that's number one above 500 in the Mets minor league system. And plus, they're like on Mets level, they're like 26 and 13 or something like that. Wow. They are crushing it, obviously because of the pitchers we just mentioned.
Right.
But on top of that, there's guys like who else? Who's down there? Alex Ramirez is down there. De Los Santos is down there. So St. Lucie's been playing pretty well, but obviously you got to bump the guys up because they're playing so well.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so that's it in terms of minor leaguers. So
awesome.
I'm sure more is going to happen throughout the season.
Yes, absolutely. And hopefully, that's cool about St. Lucie, all those, kind of young Arsenal pitchers. Hopefully we'll get to see them doing that, in the big leagues sooner rather than later.
Yeah, you go head down to Brooklyn, go watch them. They'll be there the rest of the season.
That would be great. We'll hang out with Chris Newell, our guy, friend of the show.
There you go.
That would be great.
Absolutely.
But I think that's it for this week's episode. Patrick, thanks so much for filling in. We really appreciate it. We'll talk to everybody after the San Francisco series is over. But until then, enjoy the games and let's go Mets.